morning, friends. I'm back to the morning session, meeting you on the other side. Uh, Before this, we finished a few subunits or subtopics in the third chapter, methodologies. I think we did sample and tools, assumption, time frame, limitation and delimitation, and so on. Today, in this session, we will handle variables. Time and again, I have said that variables are those things in which you are interested to study, have a relation, and you can measure them. Now, measure does not necessarily mean that you have to measure using a tape measure or a weight, something like that. It can be also, you can count them, or you can categorize them like color, red, blue, green, or gender, male and female. So those are also variables which can be studied, which are of interest to your study, and they can be categorized if not measured. So having said that, we'll take a simple example so you understand, at least you begin to get a basic picture of variables. Now there are three cars, red, green and blue. You want to know that if a driver drives a red car or a blue car or a green car, will the color of the car affect his driving speed subconsciously? So you appoint a driver, take him to a race track, which is maybe half kilometer round. You don't tell him anything about the study. You just tell him you drive. So first you give him maybe a green car. He drives about 50 laps. You measure the speed, average speed, let's say. Then at the same time, next day, you call him again, and again you make him drive the red car. Again, you note down the average speed for the 50 laps. The third day, you make him drive the blue car. Same procedure, you note down the average speed of the 50 laps. Now you sit down and see whether his driving increased. I mean, whether the speed of his driving increased when he was sitting in the red car or the green car or the blue car, or was it the same? So now here, what are you doing? You're using a variable. What is a variable? We said something that you are interested in, which can be measured or put into category. So red, green and blue. So cars you can put into category. Also variables are those things which can vary. So the car color is a variable because it can vary. It can become green, red and blue. Now you are studying the effect of the color of the car with the driving speed. That is the mental state of the driver in the form of driving speed. So can you measure the driving speed? Yes. So that is, driving speed becomes the variable. So now in your study you have two kinds of variables. One is a categorical variable, that is the variable which you can put into categories red, green and blue. And one is numerical variable, that is the speed of the car. So now you have got a basic idea about variables. It can be a categorical variable, it can be a variable with categorical data, or it can be variable with a numerical data. So having said that, we will dive right into the theoretical concepts of variable. So now, academically, what do they say about variable? Are the characteristics, factors or elements, anything characteristics of a car, color, or factors, how fast it goes, or how fast this guy drives. Elements that can change or vary within a study. In your study, the color of the car varies. Of course, you give different cars, but the color varies. Maybe is the same kind of car. The speed at which he drives also varies. They form the basis of research questions and help in measuring relationship and differences. See, now your research question is, does the color of the car affect the speed with which the driver drives? You want to find the relationship if there exists one, and it becomes a part of your question. The color of the car and the speed at which the driver drives. So in your question, these two variables become an integral part. Variables should be clearly stated so that they can be observed, measured, and analyzed. Like I said, variables are those things which you want to study and can be measured or counted or put into categories. So they have to be clearly stated. Otherwise, how you will how you'll be able to measure it or even observe it? There will be no point in the study, right? So it has to be clearly stated. And understanding variable types and using appropriate variables in a study ensures accuracy, reliability, validity of the finding. Now, this explanation part is for unit 3 and 4. You'll understand it better. But just like understanding variable type. Now, for example, the categorical variable, colors, you can put them into category. The numerical variable, speed, height. So these are variable types. There are many more, which I think you will deal when you go in unit 3 and 4. So understanding these types can help you to, have appropriate ways to study them, and that will have a big impact on your reliability and the validity of the study. Now, moving further, there are many types of variables. See, variables can have many types of data, but within variables, you can term them as into many categories depending on their utility or depending on how you nominate them. There are independent variables, dependent variables, intervening variables, extraneous variables, and modulo variables. So let's dive into independent variables. Now, before we go into looking into independent variables, I'll give you a short story or a skit maybe for you to visualize. Suppose you are standing in front of a small kid and you push the kid. So what will normally happen? The kid will fall. So the falling of the kid is dependent on your pushing, right? So the falling of the kid becomes a dependent variable. And since you are not dependent on anyone, it is your own wish which you are pushing the kid down. So sad. But play along with me for this example. So you are independent variable. So you got it very clear. Every time I myself get puzzled with dependent, independent, So this example or this kit clearly tells you where independent stands and where dependent falls. That means something on which you can have an effect, that is dependent, and something which works independently, that is independent. For example, you teach in a method A, suppose maths, and you use another method B, and then you take a test. Now the test results are dependent on your teaching style, The test results is like the child falling. So they are dependent variable. And your teaching has nothing to do with the falling, or your teaching has nothing to do with the scores when it begins. So your teaching style, whether it's A or B, is an independent variable. I hope you got the idea. So independent variable, those that the researcher deliberately changes or manipulates to observe its effect on another variable. So a teacher deliberately changes the teaching style A, style B, to see does it have any effect on the scores of the children. What's the example here? A teacher changes the teaching method, traditional lecture versus activity based learning, to see how it affects the students' learning outcome. Very simple. So independent variable here is the teaching method. Dependent variable. Now, is the outcome, the falling of the child, the scores of the class, is the outcome. So whatever is the outcome always depends on something, right? So they are dependent. Is the outcome or effect that is measured to see how it responds to changes in the independent variable. Teaching style is independent variable. So how does it impact the scores of the students when the teaching style goes from A to B? So the scores of the students are dependent variable. The researcher measures the students' test scores after using different teaching methods. So test scores become dependent variable. So DV, dependent variable, is students' test score. Intervening variables is like that aunt, in everybody's life there is one aunt which we are a little bit soft towards, whether it's your mother's sister, father's sister, or your mother's friend, or maybe your granny, whoever. So they have certain psychological, emotional impact hold on you. So suppose a guy has a disagreement with his wife, and wife knows that this lady has hold on you, so she will go to her and tell her about the case and ask her to intervene. So then this aunt calls this guy, and he has no way to say no, because he has never said no to her. So he says yes, okay. So the wife has a way. So intervening variable is like that. Okay, formally we'll go and see what it is. It is a factor that comes in between independent variable and dependent variable, helping to explain how or why the independent variable affected the dependent variable. So suddenly the husband has become good to his wife. There is one factor which explains अचानक क्या हो गया, आंटी बीच में आ गई. Class example is, suppose you are teaching a new method and the dependent variable is the score, the teaching style is the independent variable. But how does your teaching style affect the scores? Through the motivation of the students. So although you are not measuring motivation is the intervening factor that affects the scores of the student. So given your teaching style, if it motivates the students, then they will fare better. So motivation is an intervening factor. So when you do research and do report, you have to sit down and think at what factors are intervening, so you can make a mention in your report, so that reader will better understand your study results. So student motivation may increase with activity-based learning, which in turn leads to better test scores. So student motivation becomes intervening variable. You are not measuring it, you are not doing anything, but you are in the back of the mind, you know that if the motivation increases, the results will increase. Extraneous variables. Extraneous variable is like that mother-in-law who always interferes in the couple's life. She says, "नहीं मेरे बेटे को वो अच्छा लगता है, मेरे बेटे को ये ऐसे बनाना अच्छा लगता है," and all that. And the girl is like, "अरे छोड़ ला यार, अभी उसको मैं जो दूंगी ना वही अच्छा लगेगा." So always there is a competition. Extraneous. So she is outside the circle, but she always tries to bring herself inside the circle. So it affects the relationship. Exactly, it is like this in your study. Although it is a joke, but it's a perfect example. It is an uncontrolled factor. Think of the mother-in-law that might unintentionally, see, sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's unintentional, unintentionally influence the dependent variable, potentially confusing the results. The couple have come back from honeymoon, they are so much in love. Within 1 week, then they have a problem because the mother-in-law is there. So the example is classroom environment like noise level, lighting may affect the test performance regardless of teaching method. I've given this example several times that you have given a test, you have taught in a new method, you want to give a test and measure the performance, but on that day of the test someone suddenly comes on the street and uses a pneumatic drill and starts drilling a hole on the footpath. Huge noise, but there is no way you can control it. So then what happens? It's an extraneous variable which may affect the study of your result. Suppose you are teaching in an international school, all the classes are AC classrooms, but suddenly that day the light goes off and even the generator is not working. So, but still you have traveled very far to get these test results. So you have to conduct the test. So the atmosphere in the class, which the students are not used to, they are not village students. They are like सुबह से शाम रात को एसी में ही पले हैं तो क्लास में भी एसी. So suddenly it irritated them. So it might have an impact on the results. So extraneous variables, classroom environment. So we'll come to modular variables. Modular variables is sort of a very old name and it has some different meaning in a different setup. But these days it is known as moderator. I'm using modular because it is mentioned in your syllabus. So moderator variable affects the strength or direction of the relationship between the independent and dependent variables. I'll give you an example. Suppose you're doing a test on maths. Now, if these children some of them have attended a tuition class in which already they know this about this unit, so then what will happen? That test results will become very good. But that test results being very good not necessarily is dependent or was dependent on the way you taught or the new method of style of teaching. It could have been affected by that situation which is not in your control. So that can be a moderator variable. Students' prior knowledge may strengthen or weaken the effect of the teaching method or test scores. Activity-based learning may help low knowledge students more than high knowledge ones. For example, you are giving activity-based learning. Some students who are highly intelligent or their home environment is different, they do a lot of activity work. The father every month he brings some, he orders some play sets from the internet. He does everything, and then there are few students who are not very rich and the father doesn't care what they do and all that. So he has not much activity, just sitting in front of the TV and watches that shows the whole day. So when you introduce an activity-based learning, then what happens? Suddenly the guy who has never done activity, he gets charged and his results are very good. But the guy who has been doing activity his whole life at home also, so it is not very different. So it may not affect him very much. It's not that it will affect him negatively, but the change in the child who has never involved in activities, that will be a big change. So these are moderator variables. So when you do a test or a study, you have to think, sit back, think about all these things that could affect your study as a honest researcher. If you are a dishonest researcher, it really doesn't care. You'll say कौन पढ़ने वाला है मेरा रिपोर्ट जो खाली पीएचडी लेने का है बस सैलरी बढ़ जाएगा पोस्ट मिलेगा चलता है example students' prior knowledge. So these are moderator variables. Now, as I said, you as a researcher decide on the study, the way the study is going to be conducted, what variable, which variable is independent, which variable is dependent, and so on and so forth. But the reader who is reading your report maybe after 1 year, 2 years, or 10 years doesn't know what has gone through your mind or how you are going to use these variables to measure something that you have put in your objective or your question or your hypothesis. So here you have to explain that the variables which you have nominated, how they are going to exactly measure what you have stated that I want to measure this in my study to find a relationship. This is where you explain. So that is what is operationalization of variables. Means how will you put the variables into operation? So operationalization is defining how abstract concepts will be measured and observed in a study, translating variables into measurable indicators. Abstract concepts like motivation, attitude, aptitude. Aptitude can be measured through skills and all that. So anything which is abstract, then or a person's mood or a person's depressive state. So all abstract concepts. So if you want to measure that as a variable, then you have to explain how this will help you measure those abstract concepts. So you have to specify what variable represents. So you'll say, okay, I will measure his, how many times he smiles or she smiles, or how many times he's angry, or something like that. You have to explain that. Example, student motivation measured by a 10-item Likert scale survey. Likert scale is the guy who came up with a scale of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You give a rank, you give a number. In this case, what will you do? Or rank this into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He says, okay, I am very happy. Number 5. I agree to this. Number 2. Something like that. Break complex variables into observable components. Example, again, motivation, complex, attitude, complex. So how you will change into observable components. Example, academic achievement indicated by test scores, grades, class participation. So you are doing a study on academic achievement. But what academic achievement? How can you measure? Then you say, I will measure academic achievement through the test scores or through the grades or through the class participation. How participative are they in their class, and so on. Decide how data will be collected. So when you explain operationalization of variables, it will also decide how the data will be collected. Example, whether you use questionnaires or observation checklist or standardized tests. So if you want to academic excellence, you want to test, then maybe scores or their behavior in the class. So different measures you will have. Confirm that measurements accurately reflect the variable and are consistent. There are some pilot studies and all where you will go through that process and say that yes, I have tried this on a small sample and I'm sure that whatever I want to measure reflects my need that I've stated in my objectives. Example, pilot test the survey. Yeah, so you do a pilot test and see that whether it really measures the motivational level. So we have come to an end of this session and we have touched upon the types of variables, the those you have nominated. An independent variable can be a dependent variable in some other study. A dependent variable can be an independent variable in other study. So depending on how you nominate, there are various types of variables. So there is no hard and fast rule. You as a researcher can nominate the variable the way you want it to play in your study. And we spoke a little bit of data, a little bit of variables, and most important, operationalization of the variables. So having said that, we'll call an end to this session, and the next session also will be a few subtopics from the methodology section. That will be research questions, research objectives, and research hypotheses. So meet you on the other side to handle those three subtopics. Thank you very much, and goodbye.